Who's ruling the seas right now? Is it one of the 4 emperors? Or one of the 7 warlords? Or the brats from the worst generation? No. The military force of justice, the Navy, is currently the king of the seas. There are also some strong members in the Revolutionary Army who we must keep an eye on. So why am I paraphrasing one of the most chilling speeches in all of One Piece? Because it perfectly summarizes the current outlook for the 3 factions and defines how we look at the current situation of One Piece politics. But it is also how a majority of people living in the One Piece world are perceiving things. We look at the pirates in One Piece and think of them as many individual groups falling under one umbrella. There are the 4 emperors, then there are the 7 warlords who worked under the Marines until they were kicked out, of course. Then there are the members of the worst generation outside of Luffy who are not an emperor but are still high-level pirates. And then there are the thousands of regular guys, not just in the Grand Line but also in the East, West, North, and South Blue. They all have different goals and generally hate each other. Some of them make strategic alliances like Doflamingo and Kaido or Luffy and Law, while others work under other pirates like members of the Straw Hat Grand Fleet or the pirates who were allied with Whitebeard or any other Yonko. But for the most part, they're all individualistic groups looking to bring each other down. However, when we look at the other 2 factions in One Piece, the Revolutionaries and the Marines, we tend to look at them as a singular organization with a single goal and an organizational structure intended to bring order to this world. That may be true for the Revolutionaries, at least based on the information we know about them so far, but that's not true for the Marines. For example, the Revolutionaries would never have a succession problem like the ones the Marines faced when Aokiji and Akainu fought. They would never have a crisis of 2 opposing views within the organization because they're not tied down to being the public face of the Gorosei or deal with an opposing organization within their ranks, the way the Marines have to deal with the Cypher Pole. I talked about 2 opposing views for the Marines. What are they and why are they so important? We know that there are generally 2 types of Marines, those who believe in kind justice and those who believe in absolute justice. Marines who believe in kind justice believe that the means are just as important as the ends, and doing dirty tricks or causing collateral damage is heavily frowned upon. Supporters of absolute justice, on the other hand, believe in the eradication of evil at all costs, even when it involves innocent deaths or immoral acts. Followers of absolute justice believe in an end justify the means attitude, which is often used to justify what would otherwise be inhumane and downright disgusting actions taken by those who call themselves the military force of justice. When Jinbei mentioned that Aokiji and Akainu fought for the Fleet Admiral's position and Akainu won, we all thought that the absolute justice faction will take over and the Marines we are going to see post-time skip would be completely dominated by that line of thinking. But that is the farthest thing from the truth. Remember this, the public face of the Marines is and always will be to protect and serve like the police department for the world, even though they operate and think like the military force of the world. Like if Akainu held a press conference right after Marineford, he'd say, "Justice prevailed today as we fought off the Whitebeard pirates and have once again protected the people from evil." Not, "Fuck y'all and your safety, I just want to punch holes in pirates and if you don't like that, I'ma melt you too." Because if they don't talk about that, most people who join with the intention of protecting their family, village, or kingdom would not join. The reason most rank-and-file Marines supported Aokiji is because he embodied kind justice. But put it another way, if the rank-and-file Marines stopped believing that principle, kind justice, doesn't exist in the Navy anymore, they would have no reason to join and might end up joining their country's army or in the worst case scenario, become a revolutionary. You still don't believe me? Okay, how about an internal organization that's explicit purpose is to be able to disobey any chain of command in favor of Marine officers pursuing their own brand of justice? The SWORD organization is exactly that. These are Marine officers who've already turned in their resignation papers and are allowed to pursue any mission they want. Do you think Akainu, the guy who won't let an admiral enter a Marine base because he was disrespected, wants to keep a group of people around who are able to say fuck off to any order he gives?
Hell no!
We have been talking about Akainu a lot because of recent exposure in both the anime and the manga, and I know a lot of people like to hate Akainu, and I get it. He's the guy who killed Ace. How can you not hate him? But by my estimation, he's as good of a fleet admiral as Sengoku, if not better. Akainu wasn't exactly left with a smooth transition situation. Obviously, Aokiji had quit, which was a major loss in battle power, and he himself can't go out and fight anymore because he's a fleet admiral. That only leaves Kizaru among the original 3 admirals to go out and fight for justice. Although he's more active than his speech pattern would suggest, he's not exactly the type who would go above and beyond. So what does Akainu do? He conducts the World Draft, in which he gets Fujitora and Rokugyu, but he also got Sentomaru along with other people to join the ranks, which is what led Doflamingo to say the Navy is winning right now. He wasn't trying to raise up Tsuru. Please stop making fan art with both of them. It hurts my eyes every time I run across this nonsense. Akainu also faced a difficult situation out in the world while his house was falling apart. In the aftermath of the Summit War, Blackbeard took over most of Whitebeard's assets and was much more violent in his ways. A year later, there was the Leftover War, where the leftover Whitebeard pirates fought and lost to Blackbeard pirates. No matter how much Akainu acts like a mindless brute, he's able to recognize the subtle differences in pirates, and I'm sure he knows that Blackbeard is worse as a Yonko than Whitebeard. Remember, he was the one who persuaded Squado that Whitebeard is selfish and did not care for other members of his crew. Someone who doesn't perceive or take his time to understand the subtle differences in pirates, or people in general, would not be able to pull that off. A more aggressive Yonko meant more conflict and the public trusting the Navy even less. We also can't forget that Enies Lobby, Impel Down, and Marineford, the 3 pillars of Navy strength, were either destroyed or seriously damaged. He lost to 7 warlords, who weren't very effective but had significant influence, giving the Navy perceived power. He effectively positioned the Navy in the New World, despite being handed 3 broken islands, only 1 admiral, and no Shichibukai, which I know happened later on and the new pacifistas are able to replace them effectively, at least according to Fujitora. But it's still a big loss which he had to deal with. He did all of this while not ending up as a puppet of the Gorosei. Most people who are supported by someone to take a higher position want something out of it for themselves. For example, every dictator that was supported by the USA throughout history got shit because they could give the US cheap oil, or the US needed a place to stop while bombing other countries. Akainu could have easily ended up as the Gorosei's pet, as his force was depleted while the Cypher Pole was getting stronger. They probably wanted him because they thought he would be easier to deal with, but he called them the Celestial Dragons bitches, which is a stronger message than Sengoku ever gave them, and I don't think they ever expected that. So he rebuilt the admirals by getting people from outside the Navy, moved the headquarters to the New World, managed people outside his faction by giving them sword, managed the departure of the warlords with new toys from Vegapunk, all while the Yonkos are changing because of new power dynamics that are happening in a matter of days and months compared to years before. And he didn't end up as a puppet for the people who supported him, which is really hard to do when everything is fucked up like it was at the end of Summit War. Call me biased if you want, but the choices he made with the situation he was in were pretty damn good, and which is why I'm going to say he's a better fleet admiral than Sengoku. Also, remember how I said that the Absolute Justice faction wasn't able to completely dominate the internal politics? Akainu actually wants it that way. I think that Akainu chose people from outside the Navy because anyone he chose from within could have caused him more problems than he needed. If he chose someone who was leaning towards the Aokiji line of thinking, then he would be seen as weak because he's pandering to a defeated side. But if he chose someone from his faction, then the other side might call foul because it can be seen as favoritism. You might say, well, Sengoku never faced this problem. That's because he comes from the generation before most current vice admirals and admirals. He was an admiral around the same time as Zephyr, who was the teacher for most of the current Navy upper ranks. So his decisions would not bring the same kind of scrutiny as Akainu. He would be seen as a father figure more than a brother. The only people who are from Sengoku's era who are realistic candidates are Garp and Tsuru, and they were never really interested in an admiral spot, which also worked in his favor. However, for Akainu, all the potential internal candidates are people he worked with, trained with, and most likely grew up with because they show them being trained from a young age in all the flashbacks. Becoming an admiral means that you obviously have immense power and are called upon to be the last line of defense, or be sent out if a celestial dragon is punched in the face. But it also means that your form of justice is taken as a symbol for lower ranks to latch onto. This is why I think that Akainu selected Fujitora and Rokugyu. Fujitora has a similar tendencies to Aokiji, as his brand of justice is closer to kind justice. But he also is a very principled man who seems relatable to members of the Absolute faction. Rokugyu is completely the opposite. He's a believer in the absolute justice, but is also really easygoing. His justice is actually a twisted version of absolute justice. He believes that the current version of the world is the only one that works. He thinks he's allowed to do anything to keep the status quo. He might say that he admires Akainu, but it is a thinking more closer to Rob Lucci's than Sakazuki. And we are well aware of the two groups' disdain for each other. Why would this be a problem? Well, in a scenario where the Marines have to either fight the enemy or protect the Celestial Dragons, Rokugyu and Rob Lucci will choose to protect the fat asses. The other admirals will probably go after the enemy. We actually see this problem when Fujitora and Rokugyu start arguing with each other when the revolutionaries are breaking out all the slaves from the Holy Land. My low-key theory for this video is that Rokugyu wasn't Akainu's first choice for the 3rd Admiral, and there are actually Vice Admirals who are stronger than him, but he selects him to appease the Gorosei and the Absolute faction. So far, what we have seen from him in terms of strength hasn't been that great, as Luffy or the crew wasn't even close to scared of him like they are of Kizaru right now. He also ran away as soon as Shanks showed up, which I get, I would do too, but isn't a great look for an admiral. Rokugyu and Fujitora feel like inverses of Akainu and Aokiji, which makes me expect Kizaru to change in some manner too, and I'm excited as hell to see what will happen, as I believe the narratives we're getting about the admirals from Oda will be very significant for the final battle, which I'm guessing, I don't know, will happen in 2045 if we're lucky. For the first time, we see Kizaru showing some emotion in the recent manga chapters. Blackleg Windsmoke has a great video that came out recently talking about the future of Kizaru, and among all the things he said, what really struck me is him comparing Kizaru to a frustrated salaryman. He says that Kizaru speaks slowly, making us think that he is like Aokiji, but his actions are completely contrary, as he volunteers to fight whenever there is an opportunity. And in the video he goes on to say that Kizaru is frustrated by people who are motivated and is himself looking for a reason to live. Another plot problem that was slowly closed during the recent Admirals banter is he fixed the Vice Admirals. There were the strong ones who symbolized strength and the enormity of being the level right below the Admirals, and the others who were clearly there just to be defeated by more central characters and gives guys like Whitebeard or Sabo hype. We see a new set of Vice Admirals at the Reverie or in the recent Egghead Island Buster Call. These guys feel different from your Vice Admirals of old. They feel like a proper middle ground for power scaling who might actually be story relevant. The Admirals are some of the best written yet mysterious characters in all of One Piece. Their every dialogue is taken to the next level of analysis because they feel ever present in changing the story but are rarely seen. Until recently, of course. We have seen a lot more of them since the end of the Wano arc. We saw Rokugyu taking on the samurai and then running away when he had to face Shanks. We see small cracks in Aokiji and Kizaru's stoicism, as one has to kill his master and the other has been ordered to kill 2 of his closest friends. We also see Akainu in action, trying to stop Kuma from running away from Marijo. All of these occurrences happening at once feels like the Navy is going to change in a big way. What will happen to Garp? Will we finally see the Gorosei in action? Will Koby become an admiral? I feel like we're going to find out the answers to all of these questions sooner rather than later. And I know, in One Piece terms, we'd be lucky if we know the answers to one of those within the next decade, but still, it's going to be fucking awesome when we do find out. But in the meantime, please subscribe, because I didn't eat the video fruit like these other content creators and need some kind of motivation to keep making content. Thanks for sticking till the end, and see you next time.